buy things. People started getting real suspicious when he became so rich, wanting his money. People got together and they decided to all demand their money at the same time. Of course, remember, this is now reversed. You have 9 people now coming. You have the totality of the people coming demanding their money. Goldsmith has been out playing funny money. He's been using, 8 of every $9 out buying things. So he only has 1 in 9 gold coins sitting in his vaults to satisfy the normal demand of people asking for the dollars. Well, today is not a normal day. All the people show up on his doorstep demanding the money. Of course, in a system like this, only 1 in 9 demands are going to be met. This is how they run on the bank, and really was instrumental in the Great Depression. If you remember some of the movies from the Great Depression, people lining up in queues waiting for their money, billions were lost this way. Everybody charged the bank, run on the bank. Confidence is lost in the system, and people's lives are completely ruined. So this simple tale, though it's historically inaccurate, very clearly shows how our banking system works. What this sets in motion is a series of never-ending growth. The only way this system works is to continually keep growing. Once the monarchs and kings of their time figured out that this is how the goldsmiths, bankers were getting rich, they wanted in on the action. So basically they legalized this whole system, and this would be the marriage of centralized banking and governments, formation of central banks, Bank of England, eventually our own Federal Reserve System. Okay, so that's the end of the mini digression here. Okay, moving on. Coming back to our fictional banks here. So we're going to make it a little more complex now. So you have basically 3 banks. Each of them has $1 million deposited. Real people came in and deposited real money into these banks. Through the miracle of fractional reserve banking, remember 9 to 1, these banks are allowed to loan out up to 9 times the amount of money they keep in real reserves. So I have green, red, yellow, signifying different risk levels that these banks are taking. The prudent green bank over here, they decide, they have up to $9 million to satisfy all the needs of people coming in and demanding money out of their checking accounts or savings accounts. And then they also have the money to loan out in the way of car loans or mortgages. They decide to play it safe. They've only deployed $3 or $4 million out through loans. Bank 2, on the other hand, is fully deployed. They have $8 million out in loans. They keep $1 million in reserve to cover things like withdrawals. And basically, they're tapped out at this point. The only way they can loan out new money is to get more people to deposit real savings into them, to take this $1 million and make it $2 million, and then in which case they can loan out more money. But that's the only way, is to get more people depositing real money. And then Bank 3 over here is just kind of in between. They're in they've deployed $6 million. Okay, so here's the real magic. This would be Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, signified at the top here. This is the miracle of the Bush Home Ownership Society. You have to understand that Fannie Mae, I'm just going to call it the whole system, Fannie now. They're what's called a GSE, or a government-sponsored entity. They are not an arm of the government. They are a private bank created by an act of Congress. There's an implied, not so much implied anymore because we did bail them out, so it was not an implied government backing. But when it was created, it was implied that the government would backstop, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So, going back to Bank 1, 2, and 3, so now you have Bank 1, which has $400,000 in outstanding loans. They didn't want to go any further. They're a safe bank. You have, remember, all this demand coming from the bottom side. All the people wanting, there's low interest rates. People are allowed to take out loans who normally can never. But here's the problem. these banks, are already fully deployed. Bank 1, being a safe bank, doesn't want to get rid of, they don't want to go over $400,000 in outstanding loans. Bank 2, being reckless, but they have fully deployed. They have no more money from which to draw from. And then you have Bank 3, which has kind of split the difference between the two. Basically, as I'm saying here, this is the miracle of the ownership society under Bush. Fannie and Freddie start buying up loans from the banks. So now Bank 1 over here decides, well, it wants to make some new loans. It decides to sell 300,000 of its loans up to Fannie Mae. Bank 2, being a reckless bank, they sell it all up. They want to free their books up so they can start supplying more mortgages, down. All this demand is bubbling up under them for new loans. They've just cleaned up their entire portfolio. They can now fully go back out and start loaning more money. All of these banks are still servicing the loans, meaning when you make your payments, you pay it to the bank. They take a very small amount of money in the process to take care of the processing fees, and obviously they're making money off that. So basically, all these loans start pushing up to Fannie and Freddie, freeing up the balance sheets of all of these banks. So now everybody's nice and happy down here. You have all these people wanting to buy houses. Demand on the banks continues to grow. It's not only houses. During this time you have GMAC pushing cars on insane. They're just making insane loans to people. People are taking out home equity loans. 50-year mortgage, I think, comes into play. Maybe the 40-year mortgage comes into play here. All of this new credit creation demand, it's all being pushed up. The banks are taking it, bundling it together, and they're selling it off to Fannie and Freddie. Everybody's getting in on the bandwagon here, and this will be about the time of the Time magazine proclaiming, the new age of housing and how this is the new economy and how we're never going to go down again. That's usually the first sign of the end of any bubble here. So demand is pushing up. Banks are selling off to Fannie. So we come to this really complex one, but it's not really so complex if you take everything I've said here. So at the bottom you have the banks. If you remember correctly, they're taking their money and they're pumping it up. Fannie is coming down, buying mortgages up, freeing up these banks to make more loans down. But what happens at Fannie and Freddie? Where are they getting all this money from? Well, enter Wall Street. Okay? So what they're doing is Fannie and Freddie are taking all of these mortgages, they're bundling them together. So let's say you have a perfect credit rating and 1,000 other people have perfect credit ratings, and you took out a loan. They would gather up those 1,000 loans together. Wall Street, through Moody's or any of the other rating agencies, would put a AAA rating on it. Basically, Fannie then puts it out and says, here Wall Street, you want to come in and invest in this. And that's where you start to see union pension funds, 401ks, teacher retirement funds, all buying these, what at the time were AAA rated. These were really high quality vehicles. But you also started seeing them bundling the junk that was coming up from the banks. And basically, they marked it as such. They marked it as junk. Started seeing speculators all chasing high yields. Foreign banks started getting into the act, started buying up a lot of this stuff. And it was foolproof, because even if you lost, some of these mortgages went bad, there were so many coming up behind it that you could just keep plugging the holes in all of these funds. So if you had a fund with 1,000 mortgages in it and you lost 5% of them, the people just couldn't make the payments, stopped paying, you had a whole bunch more to come up and plug those holes, and it was easy money. Some of these funds were paying out 10, 15, 17% year over year, whereas the safer stuff might have been paying 5%, 6%, 7%. But what was happening as the money from the teachers' funds, your 401k money that you pay every single month into your employer, that stuff was being paid back to Fannie Mae to buy it. That money in turn was then recycled back to the banks, which then was allowed to keep funneling the money. So long as there were more people wanting to buy